40 years is a long time. Long enough to build something beautiful. Long enough to forget why you started. Long enough to wake up one day and realize you've built someone else's dream. Long enough to wish you had made different choices. But also long enough to make those choices now. You see, most people start with how. How do I get a good job? How do I earn more? How do I retire early? But starting with how is like driving a car without knowing the destination. It might feel like progress, but you'll spend years on the road and still feel lost. Why is different. It's the anchor, it's the compass. It's not a plan, it's a reason. And when you live with a clear why, the how finds its place. Without a why, even success can feel hollow. Think of the people who have all the money in the world but still feel empty, or the people who've climbed to the top of the ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. That happens when we mistake achievement for alignment, when we confuse movement with meaning. But let me take you back. There's a young man I once met at a leadership retreat. Late 30s, fast-track career, big title, the kind of resume that people envy. Over dinner, I asked him a simple question. Why do you do what you do? He looked at me puzzled. You mean like my job? No, I said, I mean, why you? And he didn't have an answer. Not that night, not the next morning. In fact, it haunted him for weeks. Till he called me and said something I'll never forget. I've spent 15 years chasing a path I never chose. It was chosen for me. By expectations, by pressure, by fear. I never asked what matters to me. That's the cost of ignoring your why. Now contrast that with a woman I once worked with in a nonprofit. No fancy title, no six-figure salary, but every day she showed up with fire in her eyes. You could feel it. Her work wasn't just a task, it was an extension of her beliefs. She believed every child deserved dignity, and her role, however small it looked on paper, was how she lived that out. Her why didn't make her famous, but it made her fulfilled. And that's what we forget. Purpose isn't found in applause, it's found in alignment. So if you're thinking about the next 40 years of your life, let me ask you something. Not what you want to do, but why you want to do it. Don't just build a career, build a cause. Don't just ask, what am I good at? Ask, what problem am I here to solve? The difference between a job and a calling is one word: meaning. Purpose isn't a luxury. It's not just for motivational posters or graduation speeches. It's a survival tool. It gets you through the hard days. It gives you a reason to get up when everything in you wants to stay down. Purpose makes the mundane matter. Without it, even the extraordinary feels empty. Here's the thing. Your why won't always be clear. It's not a lightning bolt. It's a slow uncovering. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it stumbles out of failure, sometimes it shows up after you lose everything you thought mattered, and that's okay. Don't chase clarity, chase curiosity. Pay attention to what moves you, what breaks your heart, what makes you come alive. That's the trailhead, and don't let anyone else define it for you. The world is loud. Social media is louder. Everyone wants to tell you what success looks like, but no one else is living your life. So stop asking for directions from people who aren't going where you're going. One of the most dangerous traps in life is performance without purpose. It looks good from the outside, promotions, accolades, followers, but inside it feels like dust, because we weren't built to chase trophies. We were built to contribute. And contribution starts with conviction. Over the next 40 years, you will have opportunities. Jobs will come and go. Roles will change. The world will evolve. But the one thing that must remain constant is your why. That's your through line. That's your compass. That's your power. There's a story I once heard about a bricklayer. 3 men were laying bricks. When asked what they were doing, the first said, "I'm laying bricks." The second said, "I'm building a wall." But the third? He smiled and said, "I'm building a cathedral." Same task, different vision. The difference wasn't the work, it was the why. So my challenge to you is this: don't just build walls, build cathedrals, even if no one else sees it, even if it takes decades. Build something that aligns with who you are and what you believe. And remember, your why is not your title. It's not your job description. It's not even your passion. It's deeper. It's the thing you're willing to struggle for, the thing you do even if no one paid you, the thing you want to leave behind when you're gone. If the next 40 years are going to mean something, start with that. Not the salary, not the strategy, not the step-by-step plan. Start with the reason, the deeper truth that lights your soul and anchors your decisions. Because here's the truth, people don't follow what you do. They follow why you do it. The world doesn't need more polished resumes. It needs more people who live from the inside out. People who choose direction over speed. People who know where they're going, even if they haven't figured out every step of the way. So before you chase another goal, pause. Ask yourself, why does this matter? What's the story I want my life to tell? And am I willing to live that story, even if it's hard, even if it's slow, even if it costs me something? Because the most powerful life you can live is one that makes sense, not just on paper, but in your soul. And that starts not with what you want to do, but why you want to do it. It's a game we've all been taught to play. From the moment we're old enough to walk, we're encouraged to win. Win at school, win at sports, win in our careers, win in life. We're given metrics, grades, rankings, promotions, likes, salaries, all designed to measure our success. All designed to tell us where we stand. But here's the question no one asks. What game are you playing? You see, there are two kinds of games in life. Finite games and infinite games. A finite game has clear rules, known players, a defined endpoint. A soccer match, a board game, a job interview. These games are about winning. You know when they start, you know when they end, and you know who the winner is. But an infinite game, that's something entirely different. In an infinite game, the goal is not to win. The goal is to keep playing. The players may change. The rules may evolve. There is no finish line. Relationships are infinite. Growth is infinite. Leadership, learning, contribution, these are infinite games. And the trouble begins when we try to play an infinite game with a finite mindset. Take life, for example. Many people approach life like it's a competition. They compare salaries, titles, homes, vacations, number of followers, as if the one with the most at the end wins. But life doesn't work that way. No one gets to the end and receives a trophy. There's no final score. There's only the question, did I matter? Playing the infinite game means choosing growth over glory. It means you stop asking, how can I win? And start asking, how can I last? It's about durability over dominance, sustainability over success. It's about building something that outlives you, something bigger than you. I remember speaking with a founder who had built a company from scratch. On paper, he had everything, venture funding, brand recognition, industry, praise. But over coffee one day, he leaned in and said, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I used to feel alive. Now I just feel like I'm defending something. He was trapped in a finite game, protecting what he had, not evolving who he was. That's what happens when we focus on not losing instead of continuing to play. Because finite games are about beating the competition. Infinite games are about outlasting irrelevance. The companies that survive, the leaders who thrive, they don't fixate on being the best. They fixate on being better. Better today than yesterday, better for their teams, better for the world. And we do this in relationships too. We teach marriage or friendship or community like a contract. As long as it benefits us, we stay. When it doesn't, we leave. But deep connection is not transactional. You don't win a relationship. You nurture it over time through tension, through change, through moments where you're unsure, but you choose to stay. The infinite mindset asks, what does this look like 10 years from now, 20 years? What legacy am I shaping, not just for me, but for the people around me? And here's the uncomfortable truth. In an infinite game, you will never arrive. There is no point where you get to say, I've made it. That might sound discouraging, but it's actually freeing. Because if there's no finish line, there's no pressure to be done. There's just progress, there's just persistence, there's just the next right move. Too many people give up too soon because they thought success was supposed to feel permanent. But success in an infinite game is fluid. It ebbs and flows. It requires resilience, not just ambition. And resilience is built not from certainty, but from belief. Belief that what you're doing matters. Belief that the work is worth it, even when the rewards are invisible. Think of the teacher who shows up every day, shaping young minds, never fully knowing who that student will become. Or the parent who quietly models integrity, knowing their kids may not thank them until decades later. Or the leader who chooses the hard path, the unpopular decision because it's right, not because it's easy. These people aren't chasing wins. They're playing the long game. The infinite game also demands a shift in how we define success. It's not about being the best in the world, it's about being the best for the world. Your worth isn't measured by what you extract, but by what you contribute. Every day you show up with integrity, every time you choose courage over comfort, every moment you help someone else rise, you're winning. Even if nobody sees it, even if it doesn't get posted, even if it never makes a headline. You can always tell when someone's playing the infinite game. They're the ones who speak about impact more than income. They're generous with credit. They build people up. They invest in relationships, not just results. They care more about doing what's right than looking right. And most importantly, they don't burn out. They endure. Because they're not chasing finish lines, they're pursuing purpose. Now, here's the hard part. This mindset takes discipline. It's easy to get pulled back into the scorekeeping, to compare your journey to someone else's highlight reel, to feel like you're behind. But remember, there is no behind in an infinite game. There is only becoming. As long as you're growing, evolving, staying in motion with intention, you are on time. The next 40 years of your life will present you with plenty of chances to compete. But I hope you resist the temptation to only measure your life by wins. Play for meaning, play for impact, play for the kind of success that doesn't just benefit you, but transforms the people who meet you. That's the game worth playing. So when you look ahead, don't ask, how do I get there? Ask, how do I keep becoming the kind of person who's worth following, worth remembering, worth listening to? Because in the end, no one cares how many points you scored. They care how you made them feel, what you stood for, what you stood in. And that's the infinite game. We spend a lot of time chasing performance. From the very beginning, we're measured by what we can do, how fast we read, how high we score, how well we present, how much we produce. And that's understandable. Performance is visible, it's quantifiable. It's easy to track and easy to reward. But there's something far more powerful than performance, something that determines the quality of our relationships, the depth of our influence, and the legacy we leave behind. It's how we treat people when no one is watching. Over the next 40 years, people won't remember your titles. They won't remember your quarterly reports. They probably won't even remember what you said in a big meeting, but they will remember how you made them feel. They'll remember whether you listened, whether you noticed them, whether you stood up for them when they weren't in the room. Performance might open the door, but character is what keeps you in the room. I once worked with a team where one person stood out, not because he was the most talented, he wasn't. Not because he was the loudest, he was actually pretty quiet. But when he entered the room, people leaned in, not because they feared him, but because they trusted him. He asked questions that made you feel seen. He celebrated others in a way that felt genuine. And when tension ran high, he didn't disappear, he stepped closer. His greatest skill wasn't technical, it was human. The highest performing cultures, teams, and families are not driven by pressure, they're built on trust. And trust doesn't come from competence alone. It comes from consistency, from showing up with integrity, especially when it's inconvenient, from caring about people, not just outcomes, from remembering that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you can't see. Too many people think leadership is about being in charge, but real leadership is about taking care of the people in your charge. It's not about having all the answers, it's about creating an environment where others can thrive. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be the one who's most committed to the growth of the people in it. I remember a CEO who once said, I don't hire the best people. I hire good people and create the conditions where they can become the best version of themselves. That kind of thinking changes everything. It shifts the focus from evaluation to elevation, from competition to connection, from being impressive to being impactful. And impact comes down to one thing: how you treat people, especially when there's nothing to gain. We all know what it feels like to be seen as a resource instead of a human being, when you're only valued for what you produce, not for who you are. And we all know how that erodes morale, creativity, and trust. But we also know the power of being treated with dignity. We remember the teacher who believed in us before we believed in ourselves, the friend who sat with us in silence instead of offering advice, the boss who asked how we were doing and meant it. Those moments live forever. Empathy is not weakness, it's strength in its most human form. It's the willingness to feel what someone else feels. It's stepping outside your world to understand theirs. And in a world addicted to speed and productivity, empathy is revolutionary. For the next 40 years, there will be moments where you're under pressure, where you're told to cut corners, to prioritize numbers over people, to act with efficiency instead of empathy. You will be praised for performance. And sometimes, performance will tempt you to forget your humanity. Don't. Because when you lose touch with people, you lose touch with purpose. Your work becomes a transaction instead of a contribution. You start to count things instead of valuing them. You look past people instead of looking at them. And before you know it, you're surrounded by achievement, but starving for connection. People over performance doesn't mean we lower our standards. It means we raise our expectations for how we treat one another. It means we build cultures where people feel safe enough to speak up, strong enough to be vulnerable, and supported enough to take risks. The best teams don't just work well together, they care deeply about each other. I met a nurse once who told me something profound. She said, "I'm not just here to administer medicine, I'm here to remind people they're not alone." That's the heart of service. That's the heartbeat of a life well lived. Showing up for people, not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's hard. And you don't have to wait until you have authority to lead this way. Influence isn't granted. It's earned, moment by moment, choice by choice. Every time you advocate for someone else, every time you apologize, every time you tell the truth when it would be easier to stay quiet, every time you choose kindness over comfort, honesty over optics, people over performance, you are leading. Some of the most powerful leaders I've met never had a title, but they had presence, they had integrity, they had a way of walking into a room and making people feel like they matter. That's not charisma, that's character. And character is built in the small things, the quiet moments, the choices you make when no one is clapping. It's the call you return, the credit you share, the question you ask. It's how you speak about people when they're not in the room. It's how you treat the person who can do nothing for you. So if you want the next 40 years to be meaningful, measure your life not just by what you do, but by how you do it. Measure it by the trust you build, the people you lift, the values you refuse to compromise. Because in the end, your performance may earn you a position, but your humanity is what earns you a legacy. There will always be someone faster, richer, smarter, more polished. But there is only one you. And the one thing you can do better than anyone else is to be a source of light, of strength, of compassion in a world that desperately needs it. Because long after the results fade, after the applause dies down, what will remain is how you made people feel. That's the real score. That's the work that matters. That's how you'll be remembered. There's a moment in every person's life where you ask a hard question. Is this all there is? It doesn't matter how old you are, how successful you've become, or how certain your path once felt. The question sneaks in. Sometimes in a quiet moment, sometimes in the middle of chaos. And it's not about regret. It's about direction. We are creatures of ambition, yes, but also of alignment. And we can chase goals for years before realizing that the ladder we've been climbing is leaning against the wrong wall. The truth is, too many people spend their lives sprinting toward a version of success they never stopped to define, not because they were careless, but because they were never invited to pause, to question. to choose. Growth without reflection is just motion. But growth with reflection, that's transformation. That's when the hard questions become the right ones. Not what more can I get, but what more can I give? But am I going the right way? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're the kind that create meaningful change, the kind that guide the next 40 years. Not just with momentum, but with purpose. Every generation is handed a silent script, a set of expectations about what a good life should look like. Study hard, get the job, buy the house, raise the family, retire with something saved. And while there's nothing wrong with that, the danger lies in assuming that checking the boxes means you've lived well, that fulfillment is automatic, that meaning will just appear. But meaning isn't something you find, it's something you build. I remember sitting with a man in his 60s, successful by every measure, wealthy, well-traveled, respected in his field. But as he spoke, there was a weight in his voice. He said, I spent my life building a business and I forgot to build a life. He wasn't bitter, just honest. He had reached the top of the mountain and realized it wasn't the view he thought it would be. He had mastered achievement but neglected connection. And connection, he realized, was the only thing that lasted. Contrast that with a woman I met who worked as a community organizer. Her days were long, her resources limited, but when she talked about her work, her eyes lit up. She said, I know it doesn't make headlines, but I sleep well at night. What she had built wasn't flashy, but it was hers. Her values were in the bricks. Her joy was in the journey. She was fulfilled, not because her life was easy, but because it was aligned. Alignment is the quiet clarity that comes from living by your values, not someone else's expectation. It doesn't always look impressive, but it always feels true. That's the invitation of the next 40 years, not just to be successful, but to be intentional, to stop running someone else's race, to ask yourself, what matters most to me? What would a life of meaning actually look like? Not the life that gets the most likes, not the life that earns the most applause, but the life that makes you proud when no one's watching. And here's the hard part. The answers won't always come quickly. You may have to unlearn things. You may have to disappoint people who expected you to stay on a certain path. You may have to say no to good things so you can say yes to the right things. But that's the price of clarity. That's the cost of building a life on purpose. It's also what allows you to say something few people can honestly say. I wouldn't trade who I've become for what I once wanted. That sentence, that feeling, that peace, it doesn't come from things or titles or recognition. It comes from becoming, from knowing that every hard decision, every intentional detour, every honest conversation led you here. Not to a finish line, but to a foundation. One you can keep building on. The people who inspire us most are rarely the ones who had it easy. They're the ones who chose the harder right over the easier wrong. The ones who said yes to the long path. The ones who decided to grow roots before growing branches. And the people who live that way often have something in common. They've learned to define success differently. They've stopped asking, am I ahead? And started asking, am I aligned? They've stopped measuring their lives by milestones and started measuring them by meaning. They don't need to impress anyone because they're living in integrity. And when you live in integrity, you may not always win in the short term, but you always win where it matters. This doesn't mean life won't get messy. It will. There will be moments of doubt. There will be seasons of loss, of waiting, of feeling stuck. But the question to ask in those moments isn't, how do I escape this? It's, who am I becoming through this? Because becoming is the real work. And becoming never stops. You'll be asked to reinvent, to adapt, to evolve, not because you're lost, but because growth demands it. You're not supposed to be the same person at 70 that you were at 30. That's the point. Growth isn't betrayal, it's evolution. So when you find yourself in transition or doubt or tension, don't rush through it. Pay attention to what it's shaping in you. Sometimes clarity arrives in the chaos. Sometimes purpose is refined in the pressure. Sometimes the very thing you resist is what you need to become who you're meant to be. If the next 40 years are going to be meaningful, they must be built on choice, not default, on intention, not inertia. Don't drift. Decide who you want to be. Decide what matters. Decide what kind of legacy you want to live, not just leave. Because the life you live is not a reaction, it's a reflection of your values, of your priorities, of your willingness to live true even when it's hard. And in the end, meaning isn't found in the extraordinary, it's found in the everyday. In the way you show up, the way you treat people, the way you tell the truth, the way you walk away from what's wrong and fight for what's right. That's what a good life is made of. Not one big decision, but thousands of small ones. So don't ask, what's the most impressive life I can live? Ask, what's the most honest life I can live? And then live it, moment by moment, year by year, with integrity, with courage, and with your whole heart. There's a quiet truth about time we rarely speak about until we feel it slipping through our hands. We assume we have more of it, more years to do the things we said we would, more chances to make things right, more moments to be fully present. But time doesn't work on our schedule. It gives us opportunities, not guarantees. And the most sobering reality is that we're not promised 40 more years. It's not meant to scare you, it's meant to wake you up. When we believe we have unlimited time, we procrastinate on what matters. We delay the phone call, the apology, the adventure. We get caught and busy. We lose whole years to things that, in hindsight, weren't that important. And we tell ourselves, I'll start when things calm down. I'll change when it makes more sense. I'll be happy when I reach that next milestone. But life doesn't wait for perfect timing. It responds to intention. The next 40 years won't be shaped by the goals you set. They'll be shaped by the moments you choose to live with urgency and clarity. Moments where you wake up and ask, if not now, when? I once met a man in his 70s who shared something that never left me. He said, there's nothing more painful than realizing you lived carefully instead of meaningfully. He had been responsible, reliable, always planning, always protecting, but somewhere along the way he forgot to feel alive. He had learned to survive, but never quite learned how to live. That's the paradox of time. We think playing it safe will keep us secure, but it often keeps us stuck. There's a cost to hesitation, a cost to comfort. The dreams you defer don't disappear, they just lose their spark. The relationships you neglect don't freeze in time, they fade. The version of yourself you keep postponing becomes harder to find. So the question becomes, what would it look like to live as though time mattered? I'm not talking about rushing, I'm talking about presence, about urgency, not anxiety, about living like the moments in front of you are the ones that count, because they are. About realizing that time is not a resource to manage, but a gift to steward. When we stop waiting for some future moment to begin living, something powerful happens. We show up fully, with our hearts open, not just our schedules full. You don't need to see the whole path, you just need to take the next meaningful step. Because the biggest transformations in life rarely begin with clarity, they begin with courage. The courage to say, this matters too much to wait. The courage to stop negotiating with fear. The courage to bet on yourself before anyone else does. There's an incredible power in acting on what matters before you feel ready. Because truthfully, you may never feel ready. There will always be a reason to wait. But most people don't regret moving too soon. They regret staying too long in places that drained them, jobs that used them, patterns that numbed them. You rarely regret the leap. You often regret the delay. And here's something worth remembering. Urgency is not about pressure, it's about priority. It's about knowing what deserves your energy. It's about being honest about the gap between what you say you value and how you actually spend your time. That gap, that's where transformation begins. Look around your life. Who do you keep saying you want to spend more time with? What project have you talked about for years but haven't started? What part of your life feels out of sync with who you know you really are? Those aren't problems to avoid. They're signals to listen to. Because that tension you feel isn't the enemy. It's your integrity trying to get your attention. There's no such thing as someday. There's just now. And now, and now, now. And with every now, you're building something. Either the life you want or the one you'll wish you had chosen. Over the next 40 years, you will lose some people you love. That's not prediction. That's part of being human. And when that happens, you won't think about their resume. You'll remember their presence, their laugh, their stories, the way they made you feel when you needed it most. Let that truth recalibrate your choices. Let it shape what you prioritize. Because the people in your life, your family, your friends, your colleagues, won't always be around. Love them now. See them now. Say what needs to be said now. A life lived with urgency isn't louder, it's deeper. It's the decision to live awake, to stop floating, to feel more even when it's inconvenient, to take risks even when the outcome is uncertain, to speak up even when your voice shakes. That's not recklessness. That's real courage. And the more we practice this way of living, the more we stop fearing regret. Because regret isn't about failure, it's about inaction. It's the haunting echo of what you didn't try, didn't say, didn't risk. But when you live with urgency, you trade regret for growth. Even your missteps become meaningful. Because they're yours, you chose, you tried, you lived. What will make the next 40 years remarkable isn't how much you accomplish, it's how intentionally you live. It's how deeply you love, how often you choose connection over distraction, presence over performance, meaning over noise. It's whether you keep asking the question, what really matters now? And then living like you believe the answer. You don't need more time. You need more truth, more honesty about what's actually important, more willingness to stop delaying the life you're meant to live. Because while you can't control how much time you have, you absolutely control what you do with it. So wake up to your life. Reclaim the urgency. Stop waiting to feel ready. Stop deferring your aliveness. Take the trip. Call your mom. Start the project. Say I love you first. Say I'm sorry faster. Say yes to what lights you up and no to what dims your light. Because the only thing more tragic than running out of time is realizing you never fully used the time you had.